Okay, here we go. Last show of the week. It's Friday, January 17th. We'll preview the NFC Divisional round matchups. We will make final picks for all the playoff games. We'll discuss Pete Alonso and the Mets. Again, there was a huge development yesterday on that front. And OVI watch, baby! This is the early game podcast. Listen to the show in the mornings on your commute, whenever and wherever, so you can be a part of today's sports conversations. Let's go. Okay, so let's start out with previews. And the first game we'll start with is Commanders-Lions. That's the 6 seed against the 1 seed. That game is Saturday night at 8 o'clock on Fox. The Lions have been so much fun. Like, let's be real about it. Goff, Gibbs, Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've been really fun to watch. And a great story. And Dan Campbell is the kind of coach that makes headlines by himself. It's kind of, you don't normally see head coaches able to go viral the way Dan Campbell has the ability to. And the thing about Dan Campbell is the Lions have gotten progressively better each year under his leadership. It's kind of crazy. They had last season 12 games, this season 15 wins. I think the year before that they were 9-7, and the year before that they were 3-13-1. And obviously, we talk about progression. Last year they went to the NFC Championship game. And so the big question is this year, coming into their first playoff game of the season, is how far can they go? And the team in their way right now is the high-flying Washington Commanders. And look, I was completely wrong about Jaden Daniels last week. I said he would crack under the pressure of the playoffs, but I couldn't have been more off base about that feeling. Not only did he win, but he stepped up huge down the stretch. He had a ton of clutch plays late in the fourth quarter. And so now we have the Commanders with a nice amount of swagger. They're rolling, going against Detroit, trying to extend their season. Remember, Detroit had their bye last week. And I always find it interesting, how do teams respond off their bye, right? The Commanders clearly are, they're in a good place, right? And so you hope that the Lions, your hope as a Lions fan is, we hope they come out rested, having taken advantage of the bye week. Now remember, by the way, a sub-narrative of all this is their coordinators, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, they've both been interviewing for jobs. That's by the way, big pet peeve of mine is that coordinators are interviewing for jobs when they should be preparing for playoff games. Went on that rant I think last week. And so here we are. We have a Lions team that has such high expectations, but there are a few things in my mind that go against them going into this game. Against the Bucs last week, Jaden Daniels threw for 268 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the thing that stuck out to me, and what would make me nervous if I were a Washington fan, is that they relied very heavily on the passing game. De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin both had over 80 yards receiving. Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels led the team in rushing with only 36 yards, so they couldn't get much going on the ground. And the reason this is an issue is because the Lions had the number 1 passer-rated defense in the NFL this season. So they should be able to do a good job to neutralize the strength of the Commanders' offense. Now, the issue for the Lions is that they have a ton of injuries. Their starting right guard Kevin Zeitler is out for the week. They've obviously been without Aiden Hutchinson for a while. And so they're banged up on both sides of the ball. There's going to be a theme with my picks this week, and that theme will start with this game. The lines are the spread in this game is Lions minus 9.5. And honestly, maybe I'm falling into Vegas's trap here, but it just seems so clear that Washington will cover this game. And I think that with all the injuries for the Lions, there's even a solid chance that the Commanders straight up win. But I'm not going to pick all underdogs this weekend. So for this, I'm just going to stick with the Commanders covering plus 9.5. And again, don't be shocked if we come out here on Monday and I'm talking about how I should have taken Commanders money line. Okay, let's move on. Rams-Eagles. And so this is the 4 seed at the 2 seed. Game is Sunday at 3 o'clock on NBC. And these two teams met back in November. Eagles beat the Rams 37-10. Really destroyed them. MVP of that game was Saquon. He rushed for 265 yards, 2 touchdowns. They destroyed the Rams in the run game. Both of these teams won last week handily. And they both dominated both offensively and defensively. So we can't say, oh, this team is hot, so this team is going to win. It would be a bad argument. I'll start by saying that I trust Sean McVay a ton more than I trust Nick Sirianni. And I think that's important coming into these types of games. Types of games where they played earlier in the season, one team got manhandled, but now when it all counts, the team that got manhandled is coached by a far superior coach than the other team. One thing to keep in mind about this game is even though the Eagles beat the Packers by 12 last week, Jalen Hurts was playing hurt. And you were able to tell he was being careful. He was taking slides. His decision-making was off a little bit because you could tell he was trying to make sure that he was staying healthy. And that lingers with you. It's not the kind of mindset you want to have as a quarterback going into the divisional round. I get it when you're the 2 seed against the 7 seed, and the Packers played as badly as they did last week. Now, the thing for the Eagles is, when they played back in November, Jalen Hurts wasn't so involved in the offense. It was all Saquon. Hurts threw for under 200 yards. 1 touchdown. So, the script is there. Talk about scripts. The script is there. But the issue for the Eagles is that the Rams are a much tougher team than the Packers are. The offense is far and away better. This week for the Eagles, it's not going to be easy. And they're going to need every yard they can get. They're going to need every ounce of production they can get from Jalen Hurts. This is another game where, deep down, I feel like there is an upset brewing. Remember, I said earlier in the week that I felt like both NFC teams, both NFC matchups could be upsets. Dan Orlovsky said yesterday that he thinks the scariest team in the NFC is the Rams. He validated that standpoint from that I had. The Rams have been great defensively, and they've been very efficient offensively. Last week, remember, Stafford, he started out the game hot, but then they kind of just closed it out. They weren't trying to do anything special. I looked back, and I was thinking to myself, I got really excited about Matthew Stafford last week. And I think that part of the greatness of Sean McVay is he coached an efficient game. They came out guns a-blazing against the Vikings, and then they figured out a way just to close out the game. Not do anything crazy, just close it out. And so for that reason, give me Rams money line this coming Sunday, excuse me, this coming Sunday. Wow. We just started out hot. So far we've got Washington plus 9.5, Rams money line. It's one of those things where I'm like laughing at myself about how wrong I'm going to be. But it's like deep down, this is really how I feel. I'm not trying to just like create fun things to talk about. I genuinely feel that way. Okay. Let's move on to the AFC picks now. We previewed those yesterday. Now I'll make real picks. Chiefs-Texans, another game I think I might be overthinking. Look, I outlined it yesterday. It's an unfavorable matchup for the Chiefs. To put it in an oversimplified way. The Chiefs' offense has struggled, and the Texans' defense has been great. I'm not going to straight up pick against the Chiefs. But the line here is 8.5. Let's go. Texans covering 8.5. Remember, they lost by 8 the last time these two teams played. I said yesterday, it's not like the Chiefs have so much pressure on their shoulders, unless they're going to let the adventure for 3 straight Super Bowls get in their heads. But the Texans really just have zero pressure on their shoulders. So we're going to go Texans to cover plus 8.5. So far I've got all three of the 3 picks I've made so far are all underdogs, either covering or straight up winning. So listen to me at your own risk. Okay. Bills-Ravens, the last game of the weekend. So yesterday I spoke about how I really think that the Ravens will win this game. They're currently -1 on the road. And, as I was previewing this game, I sort of argued against myself. I said that the Ravens will destroy the Bills with Derrick Henry in the run game, but then I also noted that when these two teams played back in Week 4, the Bills were missing arguably their 3 best defensive players, and 2 of those players were their top 2 linebackers. Look, this game will be a lot closer than 35-10, the score from Week 4. But I still think in my gut that the Ravens will win. So, let's say Ravens -1. Okay, that's it for the NFL. We'll obviously recap on Monday what should be a fun divisional round. Let's move on to the NBA. So, last night we had Battle of the 1 Seeds Part 2. And a few weeks ago, the Cavs beat the Thunder in the Battle of the Ones, but they played again last night. And if you know me, and you've been listening to the show, you know how I feel about the Cavs. And you know I've been very hesitant to declare the Cavs as legit. And last night proved my point. The Thunder destroyed the Cavs 134-114. And so I'll reiterate. I'll stick to my gut. This Cavs team will not win a championship. They're just not built for it. I think it's simple. In sports, you don't go from barely I don't even think they've won a first round playoff series with this iteration of the Cavs, and this iteration of the Cavs has been around for a couple of years now. Donovan Mitchell has been with the Cavs for 2 years. This is his 3rd season. It is crazy to me to think that this Cavs team all of a sudden is good enough to win 3 more playoff rounds than they've been able to the last 2 seasons. They could be playing better. They could be gelling more. But it's not like they added a superstar player to this roster to make me think that this team now is 3 rounds better than they were last year. It's just crazy for me to think that. Now, the coaching's been great. Kenny Atkinson's been great. But again, a coach is not going to make you 3 rounds better. Think about it in those terms. I think the Celtics are better. I think the Knicks are better. And I think both the Celtics and Knicks would beat them in a playoff series. Meanwhile, though, the Thunder are kind of the opposite for me. The Thunder, I feel like, are legit. Again, just gut feeling. And it's because I think that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander could actually take them on a run. That's one thing. And two, I just think they're built out better. The roster is built out better. And so, last night I think was a preview of what's to come. I think that the Cavs are pretenders. Thunder are contenders. Okay. Let's move on to the NHL. And it is very exciting for me to say that we were on big-time OVI watch last night. How fun is this? So, tied 0-0, going into overtime against the Senators. Who else but Ovi? So he's 20 goals away from tying Wayne Gretzky's record and 21 goals away from breaking it. 1-0, Caps win in overtime. And they're flying, by the way. How fun is it that they're the best team in the Eastern Conference right now, record-wise, on top of the fact that Ovi is chasing this record. And I think it's unrealistic to expect him to do it this year. There's certainly a chance. Not going to rule it out. Is it going to happen? Probably not. OV Watch is going to take a major hiatus this summer. And probably, I would say by next December, because, November they'll have to get rolling. By next December, I think that we'll be talking about, hopefully the show is still going on. But by next December, I should make it a goal of this show. Season 1 of the show will last through OV Watch. How about that? How does that sound? Season 1 of the early game pod will be the duration of OV Watch. Season 2 begins the next day. The debut episode of Season 2 will be the day after OV Watch ends. Hopefully for OV's sake, it's a short Season 1 of the early game podcast. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the NHL, I saw this yesterday that Evgeni Malkin's house was burglarized. This is a crazy story. So this happened on Saturday. His 3 Stanley Cup rings are missing. They got stolen. And it happened in Pittsburgh. And the crazy part is the Penguins were home. Malkin was home. Not at home, but he was in Pittsburgh when it happened. It's wild to me that his home got robbed while he was in his home city. But imagine winning 3 Stanley Cup rings and getting them stolen. Hopefully they can recover them. But it's the kind of thing where you're not going to want the replacement rings that the Penguins will clearly offer him. You want those 3 that you actually got on those nights that you won the Stanley Cup. Very unfortunate for Malkin. Okay, let's move on. And so we move on to baseball, where the first major story yesterday was that Bob Ueker passed away, unfortunately. He was 90 years old. He was the radio broadcaster for the Milwaukee Brewers, and he was considered one of the best in baseball. The funny part is, I saw this yesterday. It's not like I was like a Bob Ueker super fan, but he had cameos in Major League and Futurama, the shows. So he was known around the world of Hollywood. He was one of the best there was. You go listen to his calls, and I'm a broadcaster appreciator, I guess is the way to put it. I love a good broadcaster. I love good calls. And he was broadcasting this past season, which is wild to me. And unfortunately for him and Brewers fans, his last call was when the Mets beat the Brewers in the wild card round. It's bittersweet for me. I'm obviously thrilled that with how that game ended. Pete Alonso home run. We'll get to Pete Alonso in just a second. But unfortunately, his last call was the Brewers blowing a game in the 9th inning and losing. Speaking of Pete Alonso, yesterday he made headlines again. And this occurrence was unlike anything I've ever seen before, I think, in sports. So, first, it was reported that the Mets agreed to a deal with Jesse Ueker, a 1-year deal worth $8 million. And this is a nice move for them. They traded for him at the trade deadline last year from the Nationals. The funny part was that he always seemed to be destined to be a New York Met. He had a couple of incidents, one where he waved to the crowd after I think it was a catch, when he was playing for the Cincinnati Reds. And so everyone kind of always deep down knew he was eventually going to be a New York Met. And so now he's going to play in his first full season with the team. And when this move was announced, I said to myself, he factors in as a DH outfield player who's going to get time in both those facets of the game. And I didn't think much of it. The thing was, right afterwards, Andy Martino, who broke the news originally, said that this is their plan B for not signing Pete Alonso. This was their pivot away from him. And soon, other reporters, John Heyman, Joel Sherman, they started saying the same thing. And as the day went on, more information was revealed. By the end of the day, word came out, the New York Post reported, that the Mets offered Pete Alonso 3 years, $68 to $70 million. But that was way less than the average annual value that Pete's camp was looking for, that Scott Boras was looking for. Look, the Mets clearly do not want Pete back that badly. I don't know how many times I can say that. I have said that since the beginning of the offseason. The Mets have a number. If Pete won't take the number, they don't care. They will find other ways. As I've also said, they do not need to bid against themselves. It was another thing that was reported yesterday was that the Blue Jays and another team are in on Pete Alonso. Ken Rosenthal reported that. I'm not sure I buy it. We'll see. Clearly the Mets either don't buy it or don't care. You're telling me that a team is going to now all of a sudden offer Pete Alonso the $30 million annually that he's looking for, more than $30 million annually. I think for him to break the AAV record, he needs 31.8. We're talking about him getting more money per year than Freddie Freeman. And the Blue Jays were not involved in any of the first basemen that were on the market last month. So you're going to tell me now that they're seriously in consideration to overpay for Pete? Why should the Mets budge? If they clearly don't believe in him that much, why should they budge? And fans online, again, I'm part of this fan base. Fans online are going crazy. Oh, I can't believe they're not going to sign Pete. They're not going to have the bat. Can't believe we're going into the season with Ronnie Mauricio. And guys, heads up. This is the exact thing that happened last season. What happened? They waited it out. They got JD Martinez for super cheap. By the way, he didn't have to be that great anyway. This is why I say the Bills. I'm a Bills fan, and the Bills are the least toxic team I follow, fan bases. It's crazy to me. Mets fans, wake me. I've said this. Wake me up March 27th. Tell me what the roster is. I'll give you my opinion. Until then, I'm not going to judge what David Stearns does. Until he either misses out on players or the day has come and I have to make a judgment call about whether I think it was a good offseason. And frankly, last season everyone said it was a bad offseason. And look what happened. They made it to the National League Championship Series. So if the Mets are successful this year, everyone who's complaining now, I hope that you take your complaints back. Or I hope you're quiet. In terms of Ueker, it's a nice move. But first of all, if you think that the Mets committing to 1 year, $8 million to Jesse Ueker takes them out of Pete Alonso, you're out of your mind. That's not how sports work. That's not how free agency works. Andy Martino actually said yesterday that the Mets will go past the $301 million luxury tax threshold. People, that's one of the things that people have mentioned, that maybe David Stearns trying to stay under the luxury tax threshold. Again, it's not even just a money thing. They lose picks. So that's something to consider as well. But to think that 1 year, $8 million takes them out of Pete Alonso, you're out of your mind. Scott Boras has played teams, general managers, and owners for decades. And look, we have a situation where the Mets are kind of at a crossroads here. They're at a nexus point. David Stearns is in his second season, and he needs to be able to show that he's not going to be taken advantage of for players the Mets are interested in. And here he is, sticking his ground for a guy who had one of the most historic moments in Mets history just 2-3 months ago. And he is sticking his ground, saying, if it's not our price, we're not signing him. Well, frankly, I still think they need two big bats, the Mets. Right now, again, as I said, it's Mark Vientos playing first base, and Mauricio Beatty and Ronald Acuna and Luis Angel Acuna competing for third base. So they kind of need a first baseman and a DH or a third baseman. As it stands right now, it's probably Marte as the DH. But we'll see where they go from here. I think that was all planned by the Mets. I don't think that's serious reporting that they're not going to go for a big bat. Funny enough, I think Frank the Tank put it best. His tweet yesterday was, "My guess is the Mets are posturing. They want Alonso to return, but they don't want this to drag on. So now Alonso makes a decision to take a fair deal to stay," agreed, knowing he effed up or he has to find a 1-year deal to play elsewhere as the Mets move on and try to make big moves elsewhere. Frank, buddy, good job. For anyone who doesn't know, this is the most pessimistic fan of any team ever. And he's saying that. He's saying it was a fair offer. I agree. Good for Frank. So the article has also mentioned about all the information being leaked yesterday that they're going to pivot towards signing big-time relievers. And Tanner Scott is the one they've been connected to. He's the best one available. And look, it would be a great move. I hope that, regardless of what they do with the bat, they sign a big-time reliever. It is certainly going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Okay, that's a show. That's the last one of the week. Obviously, we'll come back Monday. We will recap what happened over the weekend in the sports world, especially in the NFL, and we will preview college football championship. This is the Early Game Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful weekend.